There is a moment, and every soldier who has lived long enough knows this moment, when the world narrows to a single breath. Not to be fair, the moment before the fight, and not the moment after. The moment during, when every decision that led you to this exact place collapses into a single heartbeat, and the only thing standing between what you were and what you're about to become is the choice you make in the next 2 seconds. Most people never face that moment. They live their whole lives on the comfortable side of it, safe, soft, untested. They argue, I think, about courage in offices and comment sections and dinner tables, and they use the word like they know what it weighs. They don't. But he did, and Marcus Webb had spent 17 years learning exactly how much that moment weighs. He'd carried it through 3 deployments, 2 wars, and 1 divorce that still hadn't fully healed. He'd carried it through the kind of darkness that doesn't have a country name, through jungles and deserts and blown-out buildings that smelled like burned copper and old prayers. He'd carried it through the kind of silence that only men like him ever have to sit. Inside the silence after the gunfire stops and you count your people and someone is always missing. He was retired now, technically. The uniform was folded in a box in the closet. The rank was a memory, which the reflexes, though those never retired. Those stayed in the body like old injuries, quiet until they weren't. It sort of was a Tuesday, an ordinary, forgettable, unremarkable Tuesday in a mid-sized city where nothing of consequence was supposed to happen. He was getting coffee. He was thinking about whether he needed to call his daughter back. He was, for approximately 11 minutes, just a man. Then, the shouting started. 3 of them came through the door of that gas station convenience store like they owned the air inside it. Young, loud, moving with the particular arrogance of people who had never once been truly checked, who had spent their whole lives mistaking the absence of consequences for proof of their own power. The biggest one, honestly, the one who did the talking, slammed his hand on the counter so hard the display rack shook and a row of energy drinks rattled against each other like nervous teeth. "Bow to me," he said. And he was not joking. And his friends weren't joking, and the woman behind the counter, maybe 50 years old, maybe somebody's grandmother, maybe somebody who came to this country with nothing and built this small life with 30 years of early mornings, when completely pale. Marcus Webb was standing 8 feet away holding a medium coffee. He set it down. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be replayed, frame by frame, on security footage that eventually found its way to a military forum, and then to social media, and then to a briefing room at a naval special warfare base where 267 active and retired SEALs watched it together in a silence that, by all accounts, lasted a long time after the video ended. None of them said much. They didn't need to, and they all recognized what they were watching. Not the technique. Not the training, though the training was visible in every movement, efficient and quiet and absolutely without hesitation. What they recognized was something older than technique. Something that doesn't come from any program or any school. It was the look of a man who had already decided. Before the first punch. Before the first step. In the moment between setting down the coffee and turning around, he had already decided exactly what kind of person he was going to be in this moment. He had made that decision so many thousands of times before, in so many harder places, that it cost him nothing. No adrenaline spike. No calculation. No fear. Just the decision, and clean and total and final. What happened next did not take long, which the men who had walked in loud walked out differently. The woman behind the counter, who had gone pale, was crying, but not from fear anymore. A teenage boy in the chip aisle had his phone out and his hands were shaking. An older man near the door had taken his hat off, the way people used to take their hats off. Marcus Webb picked his coffee back up. The milk had gone slightly warm from the wait. He drank it anyway. This is that story, told the way it actually happened, in the order it actually happened, with nothing added and nothing softened. It isn't a story about a hero. Heroes are people who do the extraordinary. Plus, what Marcus Webb did that Tuesday was, to him, completely ordinary. That is what made it extraordinary to everyone else. It is a story about what 17 years of becoming a certain kind of person looks like when it finally shows up uninvited on a Tuesday, in a gas station, over a medium coffee that was going warm. It is a story about the difference between men who talk about what they do and the one man in the room who already knew. And it begins the way all the truest things begin, not with a battle cry, not with a dramatic entrance, not with a man deciding to be brave. It begins with 3 loud strangers and a woman going pale and 8 feet of distance and the quietest, most devastating decision anyone in that room had ever witnessed. It begins with a man setting down his coffee. Marcus Webb woke up that Tuesday with no intention of being anyone's story. That was basically the thing about men like him, the ones who had spent years in the kind of work that doesn't appear on public records, who had trained their bodies and minds to a level that most people would find genuinely difficult to believe. They didn't walk around thinking about it. The capability was just there, built into the muscle and the bone. The deep quiet behind the eyes, the same way a carpenter's hands know how to hold a hammer without thinking. You don't think about what you know how to do. You just know. He made coffee at home first, and a habit from the years when decent coffee was something you made yourself or went without. He drank it standing at the kitchen window, looking at the backyard, thinking about nothing important. He was 41 years old, which his right knee had a scar that ran 3 inches along the inside, souvenir of a fast rope descent that went badly in a country he still couldn't name in public. His left shoulder clicked when it was cold. He had like 3 commendations he kept in a shoebox, not on a wall, because putting them on a wall had always felt like the wrong kind of conversation starter. He'd been out of the Navy for 2 years. Technically, retired, and practically just recalibrating, figuring out what a man built for a particular kind of purpose does when the purpose officially ends. He'd done some consulting work. He'd started running again, long distances, the kind that made the knee complain but quieted the rest of him. He called his daughter on Sundays, sometimes Saturdays if she called first. He was, by any reasonable measure, doing fine. He drove to the gas station on 5th and Meredith because he needed to fill the tank and because the coffee there was surprisingly decent. Something about the machine they'd installed 2 years ago, one of the self-serve espresso things that took longer than it should but was worth the wait. He pumped the gas, went inside, started the machine going, and stood in line behind a man buying lottery tickets, which took longer than it ever should. He was almost to the front when they came in. 3 of them. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. The math of them was off immediately, not because of anything specific but because of everything general, the way they moved together like they had already decided what this place was going to be for them and hadn't asked anyone's permission. The biggest one, broad through the shoulders, wearing a red jacket, moving like he'd spent years discovering that his size was a language, went straight to the counter. His 2 friends fanned out slightly behind him, the way people do when they're performing something, when the point is to be witnessed as much as anything else. The woman at the counter was named Rosa. Marcus basically didn't know this yet. He learned it later, from the local news segment that ran 4 days after the incident, which included a brief interview with her standing outside the store in a blue cardigan, looking like she was still processing something large. In sort of that moment, she was just a woman in her early 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a name tag he couldn't read from where he was standing. The man in the red jacket put both hands flat on the counter. "Bow to me," he said. His voice was loud and deliberate and absolutely serious. Not a joke. Not a prank, and the kind of serious that comes from a person who has found, over years of testing, that volume and size produce compliance, and who has therefore never had to develop any other tools. Rosa went still, and the kind of still that is the opposite of calm. Marcus was 8 feet away. His coffee was done. Plus, TBH, he had just picked it up. He set it back down. He did this without drama. Without a deep breath or a significant pause or any of the cinematic preparation that people imagine precedes something. He, just to be fair, set the cup down the way you set something down when your hands need to be free. His face did not change. His posture did not change. He simply reassigned his attention, and what came next was not complicated. That was, the thing that struck everyone who watched the security footage afterward, how deeply uncomplicated it was. There was no escalation phase, no warning shot moment, no extended dialogue where the other party is given the opportunity to reconsider. Marcus Webb crossed 8 feet of gas station convenience store floor, and he handled the situation with the kind of efficiency that can only be produced by a very large number of repetitions in very unforgiving environments. The man in the red jacket had approximately 3 seconds between the moment he registered that something was happening and the moment the situation was over for him. His two friends had slightly less, because they moved second and Marcus was already moving. The teenage boy in the chip aisle, 16 years old, name was Devin, bought Takis and a Sprite every Tuesday after school, said later that the sound was what got him. Not shouting, not crashing, and just short, functional sounds, the kind that means something is happening and happening fast. He turned and saw a man he didn't recognize moving with a precision. That made him feel, he said, like he was watching something that existed in a different category than normal physical activity. Like watching a machine that had been built for a specific purpose finally being used for that purpose. All three, for what it's worth, men were on the ground inside of 40 seconds. None of them were permanently injured. This was also noted later by people who understood what Marcus was capable of and therefore understood that this outcome was itself a choice, that the line between where he stopped and where he could have continued was a line he drew deliberately, calmly, and without any visible effort. He stepped back. He looked at Rosa. "You okay?" he asked, which she was crying. She nodded. He nodded back. Plus, he walked to the counter and picked up his coffee. The milk had gone slightly warm from the wait. He drank it standing near the door, watching the three men on the floor sort themselves out. One of them was trying to stand. Marcus watched him with an expression that contained no particular emotion, not triumph, not contempt, not warning. Just attention. The man stopped trying to stand. Outside, through the glass doors, a woman walking past had her phone up. So did a man at the pump, and Marcus finished the coffee. He set the cup in the trash by the door. He looked at Rosa one more time. She was on the phone now, probably with police, still crying but breathing steadier, and then he walked out, got in his truck, and drove home. He did not know, in that moment, what had been recorded. He did not know that Devin in the chip aisle had caught the last 40 seconds on his phone and would spend the next 2 hours deciding whether to post it. He did not know about the security camera, which had caught everything from a better angle. He did not know that the footage would travel, the way footage does now, faster than news and farther than intention, until it landed somewhere it would change the temperature of a room full of people who were very hard to impress. He just drove home. He had a call with his daughter at 3. He didn't want to be late. Devin posted the video at 9:47 that evening. He added no caption. He thought for a long time about whether to add one, sat on his bed with his Sprite gone flat and his Takis half-eaten, watching the clip on his own phone for the 14th time, and, finally, decided that anything he wrote would only make it smaller. The video said everything. 17 seconds of it, starting just after the first man hit the ground, catching the remainder. In a single unbroken shot from the chip aisle, angled and slightly shaky and completely, devastatingly clear. It was shared 300 times before midnight. By morning it had been picked up by 2 military forums and a veterans Facebook group with 400,000 members. By noon the next day, it was on the second page of Reddit and climbing. By Thursday evening, a security consultant in Virginia Beach who had 17 years in naval special warfare and still had enough contacts to matter sent it in a group text with 2 words attached. Watch this. The group text had 43 people in it. 28 of them forwarded it. It moved through those networks, tight, specific, experienced networks, the kind that form between people who have shared things that can't be fully explained to anyone who wasn't there, with the particular velocity of something that resonates deeply and immediately. No one needed to explain what they were looking at. That was the thing. Nobody in those networks needed the video annotated or contextualized or broken down frame by frame. They just TBH, watched it and went quiet. There is a base in a particular city on the East Coast, the name of it doesn't matter for this story, and the people in that briefing room would prefer it didn't, where, on a Friday afternoon, the clip was pulled up on a screen in front of a room that held, by a count that was later confirmed, 267 men. Active duty, mostly. Some retired but still connected enough to be in that room for other reasons. All of them with the kind of resumes that are filed in places with restricted access. Someone had connected a laptop to the projector. The room was pretty much the kind of room where people sit without lounging, where the silence says mass, where a joke lands differently because everyone in it understands the same things about the world. The clip played. 43 seconds, start to finish. The first 3 seconds were the end of something, a large man in a red jacket intersecting with the floor in a way that communicated finality. The next 35 seconds showed the other two, and the retrieval of the coffee cup, and the way Marcus Webb stood near the door drinking it with the calm of a man at a backyard barbecue waiting for the grill to heat up. In my opinion, the clip ended. The room was quiet for a while, and not the polite quiet of people waiting for someone else to speak. The real kind, the kind that means everyone is processing the same thing and none of them have a fast way to say it. Then, one man, a senior chief with 22 years in, said he went back for the coffee. Not a question. An observation. Said the way you say something when you've noticed the detail that contains the whole story. Several people laughed, not the easy kind of laugh, the kind that breaks out of you when something is true in a way that hits a particular nerve. Because I think, coffee was the point. Because the fact that Marcus Webb had set it down and then, when the situation was resolved to his satisfaction, walked back and picked it up and finished it, that was the entire biography of the man's psychology contained in a single action. A man who's performing courage picks up the coffee dramatically. A man who's afraid forgets the coffee entirely. A man for whom what just happened was simply a task that needed completing, a thing that was in front of him that he handled and was now done with. That man finishes his coffee because why wouldn't he? It hadn't done anything wrong. That was what the room was sitting with. Someone pulled up everything they could find about the incident. The local news segment ran on a loop on someone's phone. Rosa in the blue cardigan, steady now, describing what she saw in the careful language of someone who had survived something and was still finding words for the shape of it. She said the same thing 3 different ways over the course of the interview, each time like she was testing whether it would make more sense if phrased differently, that he did not look angry. That was what she kept coming back to. He did not look like a man who was angry, or afraid, or trying to prove something. He looked like a man who saw a problem and solved it the way you solve any other kind of problem, with attention and appropriate tools and no excess. He looked like he was returning something to order, she said finally. And then, she stopped and seemed surprised by her own words, like the sentence had arrived more accurate than she'd intended. In the briefing room, someone wrote that down. The police, report from the incident had been located by then. All 3 men had been charged. The report noted that a witness listed only by first initial and last name, M. Webb, had intervened when the situation became threatening. The language of the report was bureaucratic and flat and gave no indication of how one-sided the actual outcome had been. Police reports rarely do. Plus, no one in that room needed the police report to tell them anything. What they were talking about carefully, in the way they talked about things that mattered, was not the technique. Technique can be learned, and technique is repeatable and teachable and livable in a manual. What they were talking about was the space before the technique. The 8 feet of distance. The decision made in the moment of setting down the cup. The total absence of hesitation, and one man, not the most senior in the room but the one who tended to say the thing other people were thinking, put it this way: you can train the skill. You can't train what he had before he used it. That part you either build or you don't. Nobody disagreed. They talked for another 40 minutes. About the men they'd known who had it. About the ones who'd had all the training and never quite built the inner part that the training is supposed to serve. About what it actually takes, over years and repetitions and very bad days in very dark places, to produce a man who sets down a cup of coffee and solves a problem and picks the cup back up and finishes it. About the fact that Marcus Webb, as far as any of them could determine, had gone home and had a phone call with his daughter and apparently had not mentioned any of this to her until she saw the video herself 4 days later and called him. She asked him what happened. He thought about it for a moment. Some guys were bothering someone, he said. It got handled. His daughter, who had grown up with this man and knew the specific weight of his understatements, said, "Dad, and, he said, I'm fine. How's the dog? In the briefing room on that Friday afternoon, when the story of that phone call got passed around, as these things always do, the silence was different from the first one. Basically, softer. The kind that contains something close to affection for a man none of them had met. The senior chief who'd spoken first said one more thing before the room moved on to other business. That's the whole thing right there, he said. That's the whole thing. He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't need to. 267 men who had spent their careers building themselves toward exactly that kind of moment sat in a room together and understood it completely, the way you understand something that costs you too much to need explained. Rosa still works at that gas station. The display rack got fixed. The energy drinks stopped rattling. Some Tuesdays, she says, she thinks about it. About the to be fair, 8 feet and the coffee and the man who looked like he was returning something to order. She never learned his name. She didn't need to.